Hello, everyone. This is Going Viral, and today's episode is January 3rd, 2024. That's right, we're right here at the jumping off point of a new year. Today's episode is a chat with Jim Dingeman. Jim is actually the originator of the Going Viral series. He's a military historian and progressive activist with a vast experience and exposure in public radio and television. Currently, amongst other activities, he's hosting a radio program called What's Going On WBAI 99.5 FM in New York City. The program airs on Thursday mornings from 7 to 8 a.m. The conversation picks up as we're talking about different customs that promote social associations. Jim is talking about a friend he visited in Italy.
Be the guy who would illustrate books, and he takes her out to a house they have in the countryside, and these guys are into going out and shooting boar. So what they do is when they shoot the boar, they come back, prepare the boar, and then they'll have these big family meat dinners with all their friends on a Sunday where they cook boar Italian style. I guess like cooking pork. And they make these incredible dinners with fresh, Italians love to eat. So they make all these different, pastas and all this other stuff. And she enjoys that. She enjoys going out there and hanging out with these guys. So she misses Italy.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, I know we stayed in a small town and got to know the neighbors because a friend of ours had a property there and we stayed in it and we met all his friends, and they're very gracious and very personal. It's like personal contacts have a high
Oh, yeah.
value,
Yeah.
higher
No,
value than like income or status or even politics. It's like, personalities, people you know.
right. No, Italian, that, I mean, I would not generalize, but yes, that would be my experience with a lot of Italians.
Oh,
Uh,
sure. And then there's an interesting thing, which is they go home for lunch. They take, in other words, they'll stop at 11 and they'll open up again at 3 or something.
yeah, yes,
Okay. And that part of that is they go home and have lunch.
right,
And
right,
that means they got to work. Their work is going to be close to where they live because they're going to go home for lunch. So
right,
they can't be an hour away. It's got to be like 10 minutes, 15 minutes at the most.
right,
And that also makes it more difficult for somebody to have an affair on the side, because you're going to go home for lunch every day. It'd be more, if you're in a corporate job and you're gone all day, then you could sneak something in on the afternoon. But I don't think it's as feasible in Italy. Although they have a reputation for a lot of romantic things too. But in any event, I'm just saying that it makes it more community oriented. Everybody knows everybody. Is a small town because it isn't a big city. Now they have big cities like Milan and Rome and I don't know what other ones. Oh, Naples. They're big complex cities, but I still think they're kind of mostly neighborhood oriented. You've been there.
yeah. No, it's true that in these, but in a way, I mean, even New York. I mean, look, any big city is there. I mean, it depends on the level of integration of people in the neighborhood and activities. But I see that. I've seen that in every kind of place I've lived in. Although, of course, New York is more alienating than other places. But any big city, I think, has a sense of neighborhoodness, if you will. I know growing up in the village, it was a small town as far as I was concerned.
Yeah.
It made me see New York as essentially a agglomeration of dozens and dozens of small towns in all the boroughs. If
Hmm.
you neighborhoods that way.
Yeah.
And I'm sure when you grew up in Brooklyn, it was sort of
Yeah. Well, I grew up
neighborhood.
in an apartment building which had like four sectors, 7 stores, story. 7 times 6 is 42, I guess.
Right.
Times 4 is about like 120 units, something like that. And there's weather. So all the kids that were there as part of families would play, we would associate with each other, even inside the lobby of the building and so forth, or a little like I don't want to say gang, but like our gang type thing. A bunch of people who hung out together and went play ball together and stuff. Yeah, that's right. It was like a community, but there were local communities next to me that were famous. Brighton Beach, Coney Island, Red Hook, or I don't know, Gravesend Bay, and then there was a separate community called Sea something, Sea Lake, I don't know, Sea Lake, whatever it was called. It was like a gated community at the end, at one end of Coney Island. And I
Mm.
had friends I met, people I met who grew up next to me and stuff. A couple of bunch of, some people were famous and so forth. But yes, very neighborhood, and also with the local schools. Go to public school, so you got your friends, and everybody lives close by. So that's true, but I don't think it's true in LA because LA is like a suburban. There's much more distance between people.
Mm.
So you don't necessarily have close association with people.
Hmm.
And it's LA. It's more sterile. And so, I mean, show business people hang together and they all know each other. Jews, the Orthodox community, they all stick together like glue. And they exclude other people. I don't mean viciously exclude, but the basic activities are within their Jewish community, the Orthodox or the observant Jews.
Mm.
And it's little neighborhoods, but well, I shouldn't say that. On the east side with the Latinos, they're very oriented towards small tribal activities and clusters, families, bigger families that stay together and work together in the same enterprise or the same business, construction or whatever. So they're much more networked together, glued together in
Mm.
families. But what about your family? You ever see your brothers, sisters, cousins, aunts, uncles?
Nah, not really. I don't see them too often. I haven't seen my sister in a long time, nor my stepbrother or sister. I haven't seen them in years. But I think people as they get older, they create their own sense of a family, if you will, with the people they're around, their friends or
Yeah,
others. I mean, because at that point, you might have people who've been married for a long time. I mean, there's a person, his wife just died 2 years ago, so he's pretty distraught. He's sort of gotten over it, but he's still, I'm sure, it's a very big hole in his life emotionally. Um, and you sort of construct your own sense of family with people who you're close to. I mean, I see that as something I've always found, part of my life ever since the 70s. So, because, there's a certain point of sense where, I really don't really have much interaction with my blood family for a long time, many years.
yeah.
So,
But
so I
you
don't,
have association with the people you're spending your activities with, whether it's
yeah, yeah. I mean,
volunteer or for money. It's the people you work with or the
well,
people
yeah,
you participate with.
I have my son. So that's certainly,
Oh, I
I mean,
didn't know that. You have a son.
yeah, sure, I have a son. And, so I have him, but, and we live together. But,
Oh,
but yeah, so I deal with him a lot, but that's sort of a crazy love hate relationship.
yeah,
Uh, but I mean, it's an interesting question because then you meet people who do indeed gather together with large blood relatives. I mean, I know somebody who he drove down to San Diego and had a Christmas with he has a big family. He has 4 kids, and his second wife has two kids, so they've
Yeah,
got
yeah,
a
yeah. Big family.
yeah,
I
they
don't
got a lot
have
of
that. I don't have that. I have two kids. One doesn't talk to us. The other one's not married. No, no grandkids. But I have
right.
cousins who have like football teams, They had
Yeah,
four kids and the kids had four kids, and there you go. Yeah,
yeah,
So I know groups like that, but they're not the ones, but those, oh, I have one whatever, different families. So the groups we hang out with are ex-Scientologists, people associated with Pacifica, some
right,
show business people, and some real estate people, maybe some computer people that I know, and just different. Oh, and art people I know from going to art galleries. So we have, like, we just had one. We had a holiday party, about 50 people, and we try to pull them from these different groups and get them into touch with each other. Like, here's somebody you don't know, but it's interesting to talk to them. Here's a guy who's a doctor and an activist, and he works in a hospice, and he's trying to help Pacifica. And what do? You're a computer, uh, you know, thing, and this guy's an editor. And get them, mixed, not like one click. And oh, here's a Scientologist. Listen how crazy this sounds. So you get them. But the point being, we have to work on creating that integrated culture of people who know each other. And everybody had a great time because there hasn't been enough gatherings since the pandemic.
yeah,
So
yeah.
this was like, oh my God, here we are, 50 people in a room, and
Well,
strangers,
well,
no
that we'll see that
masks.
we'll see that again when my mother was alive, in Northern California. I don't know. It's funny, because I would initiate those kind of gatherings, and I would consciously do that. I've done that in different times of my life. I like to do that, but I don't really care if it's not reciprocated, because sometimes when I was younger, I would organize huge parties. I mean, like I'm talking about 200 people, 150 people,
Yeah,
and really plan them and implement. I enjoyed that. I have fun doing that.
right,
So, and I would not necessarily expect, oh, well, although a couple of years in a row, it triggered, oh, I'm going to do a party like that, Jim. And then like people would have like parties for the next 6 or 7 or 8 months
wow,
every once in a while. But it's sort of like, who you gather around, that's why I've never ever not been hesitant to go socialize with people, because some people are not really willing to do that. I enjoy that. I enjoy going into new situations and meeting new people. I find that very refreshing and enjoyable. But not everybody likes that. Some people don't like to do that. Now,
well,
what
you got those guys who meet in the luncheonette every
I
Thursday.
those guys, they hang out. Those guys been hanging out for years. I mean,
Years, right?
that's been going on for years, and I don't necessarily want to go hang out with a bunch of crotchety males on a Thursday night.
Right.
That's not my idea of fun. I mean, once in a blue moon, I'll go hang out there, and then I'll just, act totally outrageous with those guys and sit there because I know, I mean, I know all of them for years, so it's sort of fun, but it's not something I don't consciously seek that. But it's an interesting question. What do people find that is important to do that gets them out of their individual lives or senses of loneliness or senses of isolation? And I never really feel that. I mean, I don't, isolation, loneliness. Um, I like to be alone sometimes. I have no problem with that. I have
Yeah.
some I can do. I mean, whenever I hear people get upset about being alone, I always find that difficult to handle, even though I'm try to be empathetic to somebody who's very upset about that. But I've never had a problem. I can do this, I can do that. So if I'm not in a group a group situation, I'm fine with just sitting there hanging out and reading for a couple of days myself.
Right.
You know,
But but
so
it yeah,
but me, that's me. I don't generalize about me to other people.
right.
That's how I like to do it. But if somebody else doesn't like that kind of behavior, they do not feel comfortable like that. Yeah, I'm going to be very empathetic to that.
Well,
You know,
you can be stuck with somebody and then, they just drive you crazy. So you want to get away from them. That can happen too. Someone's like very annoying. I have a friend who's a teacher and he had certain characteristics. He's obsessed with certain political things. So and himself, he's obsessed with that. But he has this one habit that I found out was fairly common with, let's say, elementary teachers, people who taught high school and so forth. He kept asking what I would call rhetorical question, like, who really discovered America? And whatever you would say, he'd say, no. Who really discovered America? No, that's not it. Who really discovered America? He'd keep asking this question until somebody would give him the answer that he wanted, you know, like, is there such a thing as a black hole? No, or something like that. Or like, who wrote the Constitution, or whatever the question was. He just kept repeating it, and it gets very fucking annoying. It was that asking a rhetorical question. I'd say, like, cut it out. Say what you want to say. Stop trying to pitch it with like you're talking to a class and people are
mm,
raising their hands and guessing. And the other thing he would do is, which I don't know, there's only a few people who do this. He would throw in foreign expressions, as they say, Santa de toi, but in some fucking language, and say, like, look, I don't speak French or German. Say it in English. you know,
mm,
like, an old friend is the best friend, or whatever the phrase was. And it may be very popular in literature to have it like "c'est la vie," which is at this point, I would say, international. You don't have to speak French to understand "c'est la vie." But if you start quoting people in foreign language, you're just being pretentious,
mm.
trying to show off, oh, I speak 7 languages, that kind of a thing. So he has these annoying characteristics. So it's like you can only put up with him so long on certain things. I have annoying characteristics. Most of us do. So, you want to monitor those to have to keep the conversation going. But I have an interesting thing. I was talking to this about at our party. I would bring people underneath the mistletoe. There was a mistletoe I put up, and then I joke around and say, "Give me a kiss." But the mistletoe has gone out of the common lore. It was real popular when we were growing up, and I think it was real popular in the movies in the 40s. And now it's just no, what is a mistletoe? Just completely gone. Young people don't even know what you're talking about. Okay. So that was like a cultural lapse. And then the other thing I was just thinking of right now is we're New Yorkers. So in New York, you could just go visit a friend and knock on the door, you know? It's in the neighborhood. Hi, thought I'd drop in and see how you're doing. And it was much less informal. You didn't have to call up and make sure they weren't in their pajamas or anything.
Mm.
But you could do that. You could knock on the neighbor's door and say, it's hot in my house. I just came in here to cool off, or whatever.
Mm.
Did you notice that, like on the East Coast or New York? You can pop in on friend's house just like that.
Well, I don't do that too often, but I certainly don't. No, I
You
it's
didn't do
fun.
that when you were younger?
Mm, no, not I would not do. I mean, well, maybe in the post '60s period,
Yeah,
there was much more hippy dippy type behavior, if you will.
right.
Uh,
Your house is my house.
yeah, yeah. So I would be less disconcerted with that. But sometimes, of course, you have your little apartment, and people come up and look. When I was living in the village, people would ring the doorbell all the time to come, to go, you're here, I'm going to come up and hang out. I mean, I had friends who do that a lot, but the level of intimacy with those friends are to the point where, I really wouldn't give a shit if they showed up in some crazy time. There's certain friends of mine, I would never really get upset about that. But sometimes I would just want to have people quasi respect the boundaries of what my space was. But
Sound
I,
very West Coast.
I think, in the 70s, it was less that way because everything, because everybody was still. I mean, at a certain point, I was running that apartment like a commune. So people would come in, they'd rent. I had a 2-bedroom apartment, so I could have people sleeping here, sleeping there, sharing. The rent was low, so it was something they wouldn't have to spend much money on, and they could have a place to sleep. And
Yeah, but
so,
in terms of familiarity, I mean, I remember when, yes, it is the 60s. So I was, I don't know what the hell I was doing because I don't remember that well if I was in college or working, whatever. But I was living on the fourth floor walk up on 96th Street, I think,
mm,
96. And well, it was actually on First Avenue, I think, but corner 96th Street. And it was a walk up, right? And I come in there one day and there's these two girls. One I knew from a previous event, and she brought a friend along. I said, "How'd you get in?" She said, "We went up to the roof and came down the fire escape." So it was like, okay, that's okay. I don't really care. That's fine. You're welcome to come in. But it would be like that kind of unusual things where people would just show up.
well,
But like
part
you
of
say, it was more like the 60s.
well, yeah, and part of that was, uh, I'm sure people had freer, like that kind of stuff went on all the time. I saw that happen a lot in the '60s and in the early '70s. I mean, I think that was very much a generational thing and certainly a countercultural thing in a way because, a lot of friends of mine at certain points acted like that in their 20s. I certainly did. But that got, like, as you got older, you maybe, you were in a couple situation with somebody, that sort of stuff disappeared a lot. I mean, but I always was pretty open that way with anybody, period. I mean, and I would still be that way if I had the room. I would not hesitate to act like that now. Uh,
Bringing strangers home. In
but
New York, I always used to bring
not
strangers home.
not strangers necessarily, but
Well, I
you
mean,
know,
somebody I met and would start talking to and so forth and so on.
well, Well, again, I would use a certain amount of judgment, but I mean, friends of mine who would want to come in and crash. I mean, I didn't hesitate to let them do that. I mean,
Yeah.
Jesus, never hesitated one damn bit, and that just was what happened. And you know, not everybody acted like that. Some people didn't act like that at all. But the village was, but it's hard to say. To meaningfully generalize like that. I mean, again, I'm in a city. I'm in New York City. I'm not living out in the countryside in the commune. I'm not in these kind of communal kind of spaces where people are living. I certainly saw it in the Bay Area. A lot of openness like that. It was quite extraordinary to see, and I thought that was great.
So that's like Haight Ashbury.
Well, back in the late '60s, early '70s, I know people who would rent houses in Berkeley. Let's say in the Bay Area, they'd have a group rent of a house.
Uh-huh.
And, people would come in and hang out. So a lot of that was going on. There was a sort of informality, and everybody, as long as everybody was sort of cool with each other. I saw. I mean, you'd have some really interesting interactions with people going on all the time. That I don't think happens as much these days as it did back then.
Right.
I could be wrong. I could be wrong. I could, young people are young people. It's hard to generalize. I'm not sitting there with 18 and 19-year-olds all the time interacting with them. So I don't know how they actually handle their lives these days. In that sense. I mean, would I, then impose something that is a concept of what I felt were the quote good old days, and then say, "Oh, you guys don't do this. We did this." I never do that. I try to listen to what young people are living right now and have them tell me what they're doing.
Right.
Right
Right.
there, and create some nostalgic fantasy of what occurred 50 years ago, which in a way, I mean, it was a lot of bullshit back then, and a lot of people are unwilling. Sometimes some people are unwilling to deal with that. I don't know. I'm not. That's not fair. I'd say by now, at this point, with people in their 70s, people, I think, uh, help people in their 80s who were in the 60s. People look at it a lot differently than they did, let's say, in 30, 40, 50 years ago. I mean, that's for sure.
Yeah, things have changed, right. There's been a basic gradation, a gradual conversion of the society. I heard a guy in the podcast come up with a very, very interesting analogy of basically, just not to be mysterious about it. He says the Gutenberg printing press is similar. We're going through a similar thing of an acceleration of information with the internet,
Mm,
so that before the Gutenberg press, you had to rely on an authority to tell you what was true. It wasn't
hmm.
even in writing, or you couldn't have access to the printed book, that handwritten books. And with the Gutenberg press, I guess one of the first things he did was a Bible, so then everybody could read the Bible, and then went on with other books and other philosophers and mathematicians and
Right.
so forth. And it's allowed information. It was like an avalanche in essence.
Yeah.
Not rapid like that rapid, but over historically, it's like an
It, was-
avalanche.
it,
And the
it was,
same thing now with the
yeah,
internet, which
yeah.
initially, when the internet first started and everything, people
Mm,
used to say, "Oh, this is wonderful." Why? Because the best, smartest people can now be distributed all over the world. The smartest guys at Harvard, we can listen to their lectures and they'll tell us everything because they're the authorities. So that a lot of people looked at it as a way to funnel from top down more flow of information through the internet. But what happened was, and I'll never forget the first my son was playing a game with somebody in New York, and I think it was around 9/11 or something. And he was talking to people about what's happening in New York, or maybe it was some other event. And I said,
mm,
"You're actually talking to people in New York?" "Yeah, and it's this and that, and the videos and everything." So it created a peer-to-peer
mm.
method of communication where everybody can talk to anybody, can talk to everybody, and everybody can talk to anybody. So
Right.
it undercut the authority. So you don't have to depend upon an authority. You can search through the internet if you want to take the time to discover yourself
Mm,
what are the what's the historical information, what's the statistics, what are the
mm,
other ideas, who, what, when, what does it look like, where is it,
mm.
what country has the biggest buildings, whatever the concept is. You're no longer bound to a top and a hierarchy of intelligence and
Mm,
authority. So, but I think it was interesting of the consequences of the Gutenberg Bible on history and the consequences of the internet, and going along with that, the devices, the smartphone, etc., and how that changes society and the legitimacy of authorities and their ability to influence and control society,
mm.
and the ability for factions to more easily organize. Like, I guess you could say a classic one, which we don't really talk about anymore, was the Arab Spring. Isn't that what it
Mm.
was called, right? The Arab Spring.
Right.
And so there was like a movement which apparently was just formulated by nobody's, not, I mean, not authorities or the heads of organizations, but just the new leaders.
Right. Well, they use social media, Facebook in particular, quite effectively to organize themselves.
Yeah.
And that is something that, of course, governments now are very conscious of control.
Trying to control.
Yeah, they're not. Look, the whole thing with the internet was when it first started to explode. Uh, I remember a friend of mine was on ARPANET back in the late 70s.
What did you call it? Arnet?
ARPANET, ARPANET,
ARPANET? Never heard of that
ARPA,
one.
ARPA, ARPA.
Okay, okay, okay.
That was done. That was when they were experimenting with how to set up a communication system if a nuclear war occurred. So that was where there was impetus to set up a digital form of communication if, in fact, everything else is destroyed by nuclear war. So ARPANET was the Army Research Project Agency. That was the early part of the internet. And I sort of looked at it with, great skepticism. But this person was like, I remember he showed it to me back in 1982, 81 or something like that. And I said, what's the big deal? And, so little did I know. And then when it started to mushroom in the early 90s, it took me a while to really understand what was going on. And then I uh, was very lucky to have somebody who was a very good teacher. He liked to teach and he taught me how to use it, which was extraordinary. I was still relatively ignorant about how to use it. It wasn't until, I'd say about the early to mid 90s that I began to really understand its power. And then it was like, holy cow. But then I was sort of bought into the whole notion that it was this, along the lines of what you said, this great democratizing tool. Now, it is a great democratizing tool. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But, you now have a more sophisticated view about the downsides
Well,
of what it.
yeah, yeah, but it's sort of like a steak knife. You can use a steak knife to perform an operation that'll save someone's life, or you can stick it in your ear and kill yourself.
Right,
You
right, right,
know.
right, right. Well, and also, but also, look at the to me, what is, let's look at the medium that you and I are
Talking about, right, like
familiar with. Well,
podcasts.
radio. Well, let's say with radio. Now, radio is to me a an important form of communication, but a form of communication that is increasingly eclipsed by the growth of the digital information mediums that have gone on and evolved for the past 50 years, 60 years.
Yeah.
And one of the problems you have with these stations is that they just have not integrated themselves in this new technology in any creative way. They should have been leading and innovating in terms of figuring out how to synthesize all these new forms. Instead, they are sort of back in the dinosaur brontosaurus age when it comes to this. They really have not really, uh, for all sorts of reasons, been able to successfully make the transition. And that is as far as I'm concerned, that's one of the reasons why all the stations are suffering, aside from the fact that you have other people who now dominate these stations in terms of content who never ever have wanted to scrutinize what they're doing at all in terms of its effectiveness. They have all sorts of illusions of grandeur about
Yeah.
what their actual impact is. But in reality, we know the bottom line is that their impact is minimal at best. And frankly, negligible is more realistic. And that is seen in the constant financial problems that these stations are suffering. And also, the growth and fragmentation of media is to me quite profound. You have print media basically collapsing. You have the all the different forms of social and digital media growing and filling in all these gaps that and also have pernicious effects because people given their skepticism about mainstream media, and I'm not somebody who, would approach the mainstream media as what they say is the honest to God's truth, because I don't feel that way. But again, one of my jump off points is indeed like listening to, a mainstream media show. Like I was looking recently at Ari Melber, and he's
Who?
list Ari Melber, who does a show on MSNBC, and he was basically crediting the staff that supports that show. And here you've got a one man show. Now, how many people actually are working in support of him directly? I don't know. But I counted 67 people. The acknowledge. Now, does Ari Melber need a staff of 67 producers? No. I'm sure he has maybe 5 or 10. Who knows how many actually work with him? But he has a team. And he also has a pool of technical talent. And, you compare the kind of situations that we're acquainted with, where there's frankly, only one uh, medium in Pacifica that has that kind of robust support, and that is Democracy Now! All the other stations, relatively speaking, have few paid staff, except maybe Berkeley. And they certainly don't have any paid staff in the sense of what used to exist in these stations maybe 30 years ago. So that's a real problem in terms of them actually, being able to attract anybody willing to listen to them. And they're not willing to question their content. That to me is the big, big problem. When doing like one of the things I've been doing lately, Ken, is shows. I've been on the air a lot.
Oh, you are?
And
You're back on the
oh
air on
yeah, yeah,
BAI?
yeah. And
When
like
is it?
it's
What day of the week?
yesterday morning at 7 o'clock. It's
Oh,
called
that's
What's
pretty good. That's drive time. I don't know if there's
Yeah.
still people driving, but
Well, yeah. Tuesday morning at 7 o'clock. I've been acting as a guest host since October 7th.
what's the name of the show?
It's called What's Going On. It's the morning strip show of the station,
Hmm.
and one of the days, and it's a lot of. It's just to do one day is more. First of all, an hour goes by really quickly,
Of
and,
course.
and you can't really do much in an hour because you just don't have the time. Although you can get a lot done, but you can't do the kind of things that we could do with these podcasts, for example. Um, I don't know how many people are listening. Maybe between 5 to 10,000. Who knows? That
Really? That's pretty good.
Well, but I don't. But again, I don't know what the actual numbers are because we don't get the Nielsen's.
Oh, all
I don't
right.
look at the stats and figure it out. It might be I don't know, 2 to 3,000, 4,000, and it's certainly not as much as it should be for a morning show slot because we precede Democracy Now.
Well, let me ask you a question. Do you know what percentage of your audience is listening via the internet and which is listening on what do you call
Yeah,
it? What is it called? Landline, like radio,
analog.
analog, or no, they
Yeah,
don't call it analog. They
yeah,
call it you
I
know,
call it analog
okay,
radio,
fine.
analog. Uh,
So how much is
yeah,
listening
yeah.
over the air and how much is listening over the internet?
I haven't looked at those statistics. I can look at them and then I can figure out how many people I could. Yeah, it's
Because
usually
no, because the reason I'm bringing it up is
mm,
if you have supports, do you have a producer or an assistant?
no. I'm
There's nobody. There's just you.
I'm doing it myself. Yeah.
There's no assistant. There's no the what
There's
do you call it?
there's an engineer.
An
There's
engineer, right?
it's
But
very good.
because if you had an assistant, you could do a survey. So I wanted
Now,
to. Oh, we have a guy on named. I mentioned him to you before.
mm,
I don't know how many stations he's on. Probably on DC. He has a Saturday show, and
yeah.
Earl Afari Hutchinson,
Oh, that guy. Yeah. Mhm.
and he can do surveys. So because he's broadcasting it uh at the same time on Facebook.
Right.
Okay. So if you can do something like that, but again, you'd need a technical crew to help you. And then you can do a survey and say, well, how many people agree with me? And how many people think it was and it wasn't? Or how many people think it was
Right.
more than enough or not enough? So you can do online surveys and you'll get a
Yeah.
feedback.
Yeah, that'd be worth doing. That's a good idea. I just
But
she look
you
look.
need somebody to sit there and do it. You can't do it. You're the host.
There's other things I don't want to get into if we're recording this right now that
Yeah.
have to do with that. I don't want that. I don't want my opinions about that to be known, at least in a way that somebody could go and reference it. But yeah, we could talk about that another time. Yeah, but it is difficult. I mean, what Linda did do is she took part of what I did in the programming so far, and it was great. She did a special where she made about $9,000. So I felt happy because I haven't been fundraising. I've been, like basically they would expect at some point
This
to
is
be
the program director you're talking about.
that program directors. Yeah, she took
Linda, what's her last name?
Linda Perry Barr.
Linda Perry. So
Yeah,
she used using your content, but mixed it in with a fundraising activity, and they pulled in
she,
some cash, five or
yeah,
six thousand dollars, whatever.
she did a $8,400 a day, and she used part of what I did and part of what other people did, and it raised 8,400. And I'm gonna go back and re-record an interview. Now I'm more inclined to take the approach of the guy that they pilloried down there in Southern California. That guy, the Australian guy that got thrown off the.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Ian Masters.
Yeah, I'm sort of more or less. There's a lot that I agree with Ian about in terms of handling these kind of things.
Well,
You know,
the thing, his thing was he always had professionals who had credentials. Like, in other words, they would have worked for the CIA or they were
right,
something to do with the government. Just like the guys who recorded on the um, noisy reality military history, they're authors, they're known
right,
commodities, they
right,
have a reputation. So he would
right,
do that. But the one thing he did that was quirky, what he would always spend a lot of time uh, giving the bio or the intro on summary of the guy who he's talking to. And he published these books and he got these awards and he was here for 10 years and he was over there for 6 years. He's also the president of this and the vice president of that. And they would just give the guy a whole thing like he was the agent for the guy. And he would
right,
maybe do it twice during the interview at the beginning and the end.
right. Well, yeah,
So it made the guest feel like I'm working for you. I'm promoting you. You
right.
know,
That's part what you have to do. You have to sort of, smear the guy
smear the
you're.
guy. Yeah, you got to catch it. You don't want to
Yeah,
attack him, right? I
no,
think
no,
Amy goes short on that. She'll sometimes attack her guests.
Amy, yeah, Amy. Well, I don't know. Amy's been.
I mean,
It's it's sort of funny. Today I listened to Amy. I don't listen to her that often, but it was sort of funny because the show I did Tuesday was essentially, see, I'm preceding her, and all I'm concentrating on is this mess in Israel and, and Gaza. That's all I'm really concentrating on.
yeah,
So it makes it easier for me because it's I can do all the work. I can keep my mind focused on one particular issue, and that's been how I've been approaching it.
right.
And I might broaden it out. I mean, actually, yesterday I wanted to do a Christmas show because I didn't have a chance to do a Christmas show. I had uh, a, a very good rendition of A Christmas Carol with Lionel Barrymore playing the Scrooge, and I sort of was in the mood to do that. But then I said, fuck it, like maybe I'll do that in March, and I'll say to them, look, let's just listen to this. And the reason I'll play the Christmas Carol again is because that's sort of a everlasting message for people to think about. It does, so what? It's set on Christmas, but that's Dickens. And by the way, Dickens quotes Malthus. You always like to quote Malthus, Malthusian attitudes. And
Dickens.
Dickens actually attacked Malthus in A Christmas Carol.
Oh,
He has,
really?
yeah, oh, yeah, he's a Scrooge. Yeah, Scrooge sounds just like you. He talks about, oh, well,
There's
like,
so many
right,
people in the world.
exactly, too many people in the world. And there's actual the beginning of when he comes in and those guys in the beginning of A Christmas Carol, they ask him for money and he chases them out of the store. He actually uses he makes those kind of comments. So it's sort of funny. But anyway, so it's sort of interesting to do that, and I can see how hard it is to raise money. Absolutely, very hard. I
Yeah.
don't. It's been worthwhile to actually do it because it's been a humbling process. I mean, like Linda actually had to sit there and take control of the situation and turn some of the product I did into something and she just raised money the entire day. She did a good job. So I'm happy to help her like that. But I told Bertolt, I said, look, I don't really give a shit. If you have to take me off the air, I don't care. Because the question is, you know, you need audience, you need shows that raise money. And so I'd be a total hypocrite if I've spent all these years criticizing all these other people. And then, what do I want to do? All I want to do is stay on the air. Fuck that. Like the most important thing to me is tomorrow I have to give a report to the national board, and I'm just debating how to write it. But I'm just saying, look, how can you have a strategic plan when everything we're having to do all the time is focused in on immediate survival all the time, and the wider questions of how to get out of this mess are things that none of you address. You don't want to address it because it's something that's too overwhelming for you to think about. And objectively speaking, it would mean that you'd have to throw most of the current content off the air because it's not working. And it's just as simple as that. And you can
Yeah.
justify it any way you want, but the ultimate conclusion is that most of it has to go or has to be sent into the HD channel, wherever the hell you want to send it. And you got to concentrate on the analog with programming that people actually want to hear.
Right. And it
And
doesn't matter who produced it if it's
yeah,
already produced. So
yeah,
if it, if it if it's if let the basic example of that in Pacifica is Alan Watts. He's died, he's been dead for 50 years, but they got his lectures and they
right,
play his lectures and it pulls a certain audience.
right,
So,
right,
but I'm just saying
right,
it's pre-recorded, it isn't topical, it's evergreen, he's talking about philosophy.
right,
And but there is an audience for it. I'm not saying you can go
right,
with him 24/7, but it's like that. So if you have a show produced by a college or something and it's good and it's popular, or you can get your hands on it and you can broadcast it financially, and there's not a big overhead,
right.
then you just got to give it to the people what they want to see.
Now,
That is
the
somewhere aligned, somewhere in your universe. It doesn't have to be on point exactly in agreement with everything you think, but you want
right,
it to be somewhere in your universe. Or if it's outside your universe, let's say it's Mussolini, then you say, okay, so here's Mussolini's, this is what he said and why he was such a great man. And then they follow that up with a critique. Get away with it like that. But you have to have something that's consumable and what it's the general word now is sexy, but it's like compelling. It's curious. People want to hear it. They want to listen.
right, and the and one of the other problems with Pacifica is why should a young person bother dealing with all the bullshit? Why would
Right,
a person want to waste their time when they can go off and do their own thing themselves?
right.
I mean, they can go set up their own channel. They can go and do a YouTube channel. They can do this. They can do that. They don't have
Well,
to put
I
bullshit in this.
was thinking when you were talking about this, having the show on Thursday morning, you have one very positive factor there as I don't know what the word, like, what's the word? A bait, like bait. You can draw in uh, personnel, people to interview because they're going to be on the air in New York City.
Yeah,
So that
two.
has some kind of a lure where somebody
Yeah,
could say, yeah, I could be in a podcast and 40,000 people might listen to me, but I want to be on the air in New York City, and I can use that as a credit. I was on the air, I was on the
Right.
show with Jim Dingeman.
Well, no, you're right. It's a very, it's because it's a morning show. See, the other thing that kills me. Well, listen, you can listen to what I'm doing and you can critique it. They're, like I'm consciously telling people in their cars to listen in because most of the people in New York, I think it's also true in Los Angeles at KPFK. Most of them do not listen to the station when they're driving their car. And I remember I saw a survey of listenership in Los Angeles at KPFK, which is car land par excellence in America. And I think the majority of the people were listening to their radios at home. So I said to myself, that is heavy shit, because that says to me that the drive time audience just ain't there. They're not listening to the stations. And
When I was glued to the station during the Contragate hearings, the thing with Oliver North. Was
yes,
that his name?
sure.
Is that his name, Oliver North?
Yeah, Oliver North. Yeah.
So, and the commentator was a guy from KPFA.
Yeah, that was Bensky,
What?
Larry Bensky.
That's right, Bensky. So, and it was like I was just glued to it. In fact, by the time I got to work, I would sit in the parking waiting till it came, waiting till before I went into work. I got there, I'm in the parking lot. I'd sit there and I'm not gonna leave the car until they finish it. Because in other words, it was like it wasn't a portrayal, it wasn't a presentation about a murder. This was the murder, the hearings itself. Here's these people getting up and lying or telling the truth or having
Yeah.
to reveal. And it would have been a similar thing if there were hearings about Abu Ghraib. So it had enough
Yeah.
sensationalism in it to be
Yeah.
relevant.
Well, Bensky did a pretty good
Yeah, he
job.
was pretty
And
good, right? So I think you will get audience listening if it's the talking about, well, LA
there's no
is
longer,
burning down or there's riots in LA, right? Let's say during the riot, you could be glued to the radio to
well,
hear a
they can't do
report.
that anymore because, you listen to MSNBC. Yeah, but you listen to MSNBC. I mean, MSNBC, as far as I'm concerned, there's a certain amount of audience that would be a Pacifica audience that listens to MSNBC,
Yeah, but
and
that's mostly
so
that.
you got a couple million people day who are listening to MSNBC, like Maddow. Maddow gets about, I think she has the largest audience at MSNBC,
Yeah.
and she's smart. She's very smart. She does a good job, and I'm impressed. I'm always impressed with her. Her brilliance. She's a brilliant woman.
Yeah, she's got a
Um,
compelling radio presence, television
but you
presence.
have to remember she was a stand-up comedian. I mean, so she has all these drama skills. Plus, she's bright. She was a Rhodes Scholar, so she's
Yeah.
got a lot of talent in her brain there. Um, but
But again, that's reflection. That's evaluation and reflection and opinion. But I'm talking about like, oh, well, one of the big failures in that is they used to cover the Apollo to the moon shots. And it
right.
was like, when they're sitting there talking, they start about an hour before the takeoff and they run out of things to say. And you're waiting for it. And there goes the ship and there it's going and there it goes. And we're following the ship. Or like when they covered the OJ race, a lot of people now watch it on TV. Now, this isn't the radio. They would watch the OJ chase on TV, but he wasn't driving recklessly. He was just they were following him, at 30, 40 miles an hour because it's OJ Simpson. And but that kind of live coverage, sometimes television news shows fall for that, and for certain times they would cover any kind of a chase where they had a helicopter following the cars, and they did it, and they'd interrupt regular programming. So I'm just saying that the hearings for the members of the to join the Supreme Court, that's contentious. That's something that I think you can get people to listen to while they're driving in the cars. When like that woman, Casey or Brown, Jackson, whatever her name was, or Gorsuch, not Gorsuch, whatever, these different Republicans who got in office, or the one black woman who got just recently. So when you hear the Senate hearings approving her, that could be topical, right? That's like
Right.
What was Anita Thomas? The thing with Clarence
Right.
Thomas hearing, and the
Right.
woman who accused him of putting pubic hair on his Coca-Cola or something.
Anita Hill.
Anita Hill, there you go. So that's drama.
Right.
But it's current drama. It's not a recreation. It's not an opinion. It's not somebody else bloviating about it. It's what did Anita Hill say? What did the judge say? What did the lawyer say? That's possible. I don't know. But again, getting back to the thing. So do you find that you have, it's easier for you to get, I don't know, I use the word talent, but interesting guests because you're broadcasting live on
Oh,
in New York?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Have you been able to get any city borough
No,
presidents?
actually, the first time I didn't do anything, yesterday was the first time I did something without any guests.
Ah,
Normally, I'll have guests on, if I let them do the work.
uh-huh.
Um,
But you can get, and certainly you can get people who want to promote their cause. Let's say like a Muslim.
yeah, I can get authors. I can get authors easily.
Uh-huh. Oh, that too. The books.
Yeah, so that's what I'm going to do. All right, listen, Kenny, I got to go to sleep. So
Okay,
let
I'm
me.
going to let you go to sleep. But this was an interesting conversation. I'm glad we had it.
Yeah.
And I'll respect your. That's it. We'll end it right now.
All right, you have a good day, man. Take it easy, man.
Okay. Bye-bye, Jim. Okay, and that's the end of this show. And this is going viral. It's the first show of 2024.